fair to say one of the more impressive starts to the college football season has been the University of Miami Hurricanes. They went to Gainesville, won very convincingly. Schedule is now in the soft part of the schedule, so it's probably a good time we bring in Manny Navarro from The Athletic, who has covered college, pro football, baseball, the entire Miami sports landscape for decades. Manny and I have known each other for a long time. Manny, thanks for coming on NewsWire again. It's great to see you. How are things?
Things are great, Craig. Happy to be back on and happy to be talking about a positive Miami Hurricane story. Felt like the last 20 years have been pretty bad.
Yeah. Every year there's optimism and then it falls flat. And honestly, it could happen again this year. We don't know. But at least the early returns have shown positive results. And they haven't really had some like key coaching decisions or anything that have to happen because the offense has just been so explosive. Cam Ward's done such a good job. The Hurricanes are now ranked 10th in the country. As a Gator, it was sort of crushing to see how badly Florida went down in that game. And I guess, last week aside, Manny, I wonder what your perspective was on that one, because that sort of was the litmus test to begin the season. Do you think the Hurricanes are that good? Do you think the Gators are that bad? Is it somewhere in the middle? I mean, Florida plays Texas A&M this week. They're underdogs at home again in Gainesville. And I don't think that we really know either team thus far.
Yeah, I think what's interesting for me in terms of what's real for Miami is what Mario Cristobal has done on the offensive and defensive lines. You saw it last year when they were able to beat Clemson at home in that overtime game with a true freshman starting his very first game in college in Emory Williams. And so you saw that was real, right? Because Clemson, at the very least, maybe they're not the Clemson of old, but they're certainly still good enough to win the ACC. They were good enough to win 9 games last year. So Miami beat a solid Clemson team. That's something we wouldn't have seen in the previous 20 years, the way this program has sort of gone. So to me, that's the real part of it. But in terms of who is really real, is Miami that great or Florida that bad? I think it's probably closer to the middle. I think Florida with DJ Lagway is a better football program than it is with Graham Mertz. That's real. But I think we also have yet to see Miami face an opponent that can challenge Cam Ward, put pressure on them. And once they face a team that can do that, we'll really find out how good this Hurricanes team is.
Yeah, so we'll gloss over this game because this game is not going to happen here. In fact, it's a circled game on a lot of the boards here. Max bets are low as Miami's 36.5-point favorites. No money line available, total 55.5. So I'm not going to press you on this one. Let's assume Miami wins, and whether they cover or not, it's very close in the end here. 36 is a lot of points, but it certainly can happen based on what we saw last week. So here is the remaining schedule, which is going to start to get a little tougher next week. And when people look at South Florida, they say, what do you mean by tough? Miami has had issues against South Florida in the past, for people who don't remember. But then it gets real. Virginia Tech, at Cal, Louisville. And after that, it becomes more interesting because Florida State, I would assume by the time they get to October, will have their issues figured out. Then they take on Duke, Georgia Tech, who just lost to Syracuse, Wake Forest, and then at Syracuse to end the season. They're plus 115 to win the ACC, which is basically them as a favorite. And I would guess, as I'm looking at this, Manny, they're going to be favorites in every game they play, with the exception of at Louisville, provided that Louisville continues to play well. So that should tell people that Miami's got a great shot at this.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you look at, who's really the toughest foe on the schedule for Miami, I think the way Syracuse looked with Kyle McCord last Saturday at home against Georgia Tech gives you some pause because he looks like a legitimate quarterback. Obviously, they lost to Georgia Tech last year here at Hard Rock Stadium, have to go to Georgia Tech to play that game. I think Georgia Tech is a solid football team, maybe not the best in the ACC, but certainly a formidable foe. And then Louisville, who you mentioned, but we'll find out about Louisville in the coming weeks. They do have to play Georgia Tech and Notre Dame before September is over. So we should have a better gauge. But I think the Canes are certainly worthy of being favorites at this point.
Yeah, I think so too. And part of the reason that there's a lot of optimism is because, Mario Cristobal, when he first took over, we thought that probably was going to take a couple of years. The blip was really last year with some just critical mistakes and coaching decisions that we saw over and over again. But sometimes, Manny, as you know, in college and pro football, I mean, talent can really get you extremely far, maybe not all the way to the top. I think Hurricanes fans would take that right now. But as you said, the recruiting and adding some impact players to the line have people thinking that maybe this is one of those years that even if some small mistakes are made on the coaching end, the talent can overcome them.
Yeah, and look, you have one of the best quarterbacks in college football. I think Cam Ward has certainly proven to be one of the maybe top 5 transfers in the entire sport this year. Just the way he's performed through the first 2 games, having him instead of Tyler Van Dyke is a huge addition. And then you look at the defensive line. Tyler Barron is every bit as good as advertised. Everyone was saying he was one of the best transfers of the offseason. He's got 4 sacks through his first 2 games, 5.5 tackles for loss. And that, they're doing all this without Ruben Bain, who's arguably their best defensive player. He's been out since the very first series. So I think this team is for real. I think that anybody who wants to put some money on the Hurricanes to win the ACC, this is probably the year to do it. You've got the quarterback, you've got the defensive line, and you've got a really good offensive line. And sometimes that's all you need to win a conference like the ACC.
All right, so let's close it out on the college football playoff. 12 teams now, not 4. So because Miami is ranked 10th, Manny, they're minus 150 to qualify for the 12-team playoff. I'm going to assume that Miami's going to lose a game between now and the end of the season. I don't know if it's going to be 2. Would you agree that a 1-loss Miami team is in the playoff and a 2-loss Miami team is not? Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it just depends on when that loss happens, because let's say they go 10-2 and then win the ACC championship, then they're automatically in. So it just kind of depends on who they play in that ACC championship. If they play a 1-loss Clemson team and lose to Clemson in the ACC championship, then maybe, the committee still looks at Miami and says they deserve a spot as well. It's very iffy right now, really. It just depends on how the Big 12 looks, how Notre Dame finishes its season. I think all of those will play factors come, late November, early December.
Well, Manny, it is always great to see you. I don't see you enough in person anymore, but it's great to catch up with you here virtually. Thanks again for coming on NewsWire.
Anytime. Thanks for having me, Craig.